Hi everyone, I hope this finds you well and healthy. I want to show a demonstration of a new feature in Illuminated Cloud, in particular in the Apex editor, and it's a new form of code completion. It's a little different from the forms of code completion that we've had in the past, where you're completing an identifier name, or you're completing a type name, or another metadata object name. This one, I generally like to think of it at a high level as you're completing your thought. And so what that means is you're completing a declaration with the pieces that are missing in order to make it syntactically valid. You're fleshing out a statement with all the pieces that are required, things like that. It's one of those things that's best conveyed by demonstration than by elaboration. So I think we'll just dive into the demo. I do want to show to begin with how you can find this so that you know the keystroke. If you go to the code menu, code completion, it's this, complete current statement. Under Windows and Linux, this is going to be Control-Shift-Enter. Under Mac, it's going to be Command-Shift-Enter. If you've decided to use an alternative key map, you'll need to figure out what it is, but Control-Shift-Enter, Windows and Linux, Command-Shift-Enter on Mac are going to be the defaults. By the way, I also want to preface by saying if you hear my voice start to go out, we're in pollen season, allergy season right now, and so I've been struggling with that, and I will maybe have to clear my throat from time to time or something. I'm just going to apologize in advance. Let's go ahead and just dive right in, though. Let's start with some body declarations. So I'm just going to do some inner types. So public class, inner class, and normally at this point to make this class minimally syntactically valid, I need to add a stub class body. Well, if I use Control-Shift-Enter, it will do that for me. It'll place me inside the body of the class so I can begin adding member declarations in that class. This is intelligent. So if there's already a body, it's not going to add a new one, which of course would put things into a bad state, syntactic state. Instead, it's going to just place me in the class with a new open line where I can again keep working within the class. I'll have better examples of some of this contextually aware behavior as we go through this. For now, let's just move through some other declarations. So we'll just go ahead and say public, we'll do an interface next. Inner interface, add a body. We're going to come back and add some body declarations to these as well. Public enum, you knew it was coming because I obviously went through class and interface previously. We're going to give this one a slightly different name though, and it's going to serve the flow of the demo a little better. So let's start adding some enum constants. Let's start with red. Now again, enum constants are comma delimited. So at this point I'd have to say comma, maybe some white space, a space, or a new line, and then begin adding other enum constants. Control-Shift-Enter is going to allow me to go through these very quickly. Blue, green, yellow. If I wanted to add some at the beginning, white. Now if I hit Control-Shift-Enter here, I don't want another new line, so it's just going to go ahead and add the delimiter. If I do want to open a new line in between and add another one though, Control-Shift-Enter again. Again, you can see the contextually sensitive behavior here. So we'll just go ahead and add one more, gray, and that makes it syntactically valid. Let's go back up and add some class body declarations. So let's start with a method. So I'm just going to say public string do something. Now at this point there's no way that the parser knows that in my brain I want this to be a method. It doesn't look like a method yet, so if I use Control-Shift-Enter, it's just going to terminate that as a variable. I have to give the parser enough context to know that I'm trying to create a method, but then it does some nice things for me. Control-Shift-Enter, it added the body. It actually added a return statement in order to make this valid because this is a non-void method, and it placed me at the end of that return statement. If I instead said public void do nothing, and I added some parens and hit Control-Shift-Enter, it realizes that that is a void method. It doesn't need a return statement, so it just puts me in the body of the method to begin implementing. The next example would be public abstract void implement me. And at this point, it knows this is a method, unlike before, because the abstract modifier can only be used on methods. It can't be used on fields. So it'll actually fill in the formal parameters and then terminate it. So we actually have an abstract method. This is not related right here to the feature I'm showing, but it will show how some of these editor features can collaborate to allow you to write your code quicker and in a more foolproof manner. It realized I have an abstract method defined in a concrete class and will ask me, do I want to make the containing class abstract? And it will do that. That's a feature that was added probably a year ago, but it shows how some of these features can interact with one another. If I wanted to add a variable, we'll just say public integer age, Control-Shift-Enter, it'll terminate it. Now if I hit Control-Shift-Enter again, it'll open a new line for me to continue working within this class. Let's do a constant. I can't do a constant from an inner class, so we'll move down. I'm going to use a live template here to do this. Public static final string, and we'll just say foo. Now, if I terminate that, that's fine. If I say equals and I do Control-Shift-Enter, notice that it did terminate it properly, but it moved the caret, the insertion point, to the first error. So I have to add a value. So I'll add a value. Control-Shift-Enter will realize I'm syntactically valid. It'll open up a new line. If that did not have a terminator, Control-Shift-Enter would terminate it on the same line. Control-Shift-Enter will now open a new line. One more declaration, then we'll move on to statements. So if I said something like, let's do a property, public string my property. Again, there's no way for it to know this is a property at this point. It looks like a field. It's not going to try to guess that. So I need to go ahead and give it the beginning of a property syntax. But now if I type get and hit Control-Shift-Enter, it is actually going to generate a valid implementation of a read accessor. In this case, one that returns the value of the property. Similar with set, Control-Shift-Enter, and it is going to take the value that was passed in and it's going to assign that to the property itself. Now, it also understands if you have simple properties. For example, if I wanted to make this a read-only property and there was no particular set behavior, and I tried to use the statement completion on that, it realizes that it is a syntactically valid and complete statement. It just opens a new line. So hopefully that makes sense. I lied just a moment ago when I said that would be the last declaration. Let's just go ahead and do an interface method. Of course, no visibility specifier. You actually can't add one, but we'll say void also implement me. And again, because an interface in Apex can only have methods, it can't have constants or fields, Control-Shift-Enter will automatically add the formal parameters and terminate the interface method. So those are declarations. Let's move on to, excuse me, move on to statements. So let's start with something simple. I'll just say system.setPassword, and we'll just stub this out. Control-Shift-Enter, I'm in the arguments. We'll go ahead and terminate that statement and leave you on the same line in case you want to do something else there. Control-Shift-Enter will open a new line once you have a syntactically valid statement. Let's look at some other ones that are more around flow control. If I say if, the code completion for the flow control keywords in Illuminated Cloud for the Apex editor will actually stub out most of them for you. So that's actually code completion I just did, not statement completion. But if I back up and instead go to just the if keyword and hit Control-Shift-Enter, it realizes that's the beginning of a flow control statement and generates the same code. And you'll notice in both cases it places you in the first area that needs your attention. In this case, the loop condition, because I'm sorry, in this case, just the conditional expression. So I've got to say something like 1 greater than 0, you know, something that could certainly happen. And I'll say else if 0 is greater than 1. Control-Shift-Enter, it'll give me an else block. Else if block. If I say else, it'll give me an else block. Very quick to be able to write these types of constructs. And like I said, this is true for other types as well. So if I say do and Control-Shift-Enter, it'll create a do while loop with a block for me, and I can say, you know, do while true. And now that this is syntactically valid, Control-Shift-Enter allows me to start entering code into the block of the do while that I just stubbed out. So things happen very fast in that regard. And this is implemented for all of the flow control statements available in Apex. Do while, exception handling blocks, the various for loops, even things like system.runAs. If I just do that right there, it'll go ahead and create the parameters where I'll either supply the version or the user. And of course, as soon as I do that, I'm just going to put null. It'll put me in the block to begin implementing the logic that should only run in that context. So moving on again, let's take a look at queries. Let's just go ahead and stub out a query here against the account object. So we'll go ahead and just do that. Choose account, assign that to a variable, a list variable, and say I want to get the ID and the name. If I hit Control-Shift-Enter right now, I have the IDE set up that single statement queries are allowed. So Control-Shift-Enter will just take me to the next line. There's nothing to do there. If I change this into a multi-line query though, and I add, say, annual revenue, the next thing you would generally want to do is add a new clause. So Control-Shift-Enter is actually going to take you to the bottom of the current query, open a new line so you can begin a new clause. In this case, we'll do order by annual revenue descending. And that's not just for the top level query. It's intelligent about query context. So if we put a subquery, whether it's on the select line, excuse me, or used in an in clause, however it's used. So let's select all the cases as well. And we'll get the case created date and the close date. And if I want to order by one of those, I'll just do Control-Shift-Enter. And again, it's the subquery now that is open for a new clause. And I'll just say order by close date descending. And if I hit Control-Shift-Enter here, it opens a new line below that clause. If I do Control-Shift-Enter in the parent query, it opens a space for a new clause below the last clause of that query. So it'll just help you move around in your queries more quickly. So that's what I want to show on this feature. Again, it's just another variant of completion, but it is complete your thought completion when you're writing statements, declarations, whatever they happen to be. Just get used to using Control-Shift-Enter when you get enough written and you don't want to have to hit end of line to go out of terminator, whatever it happens to be, and let the IDE do it for you. Needless to say, if you find bugs with this, let me know. If you find that statement completion isn't working where it should be, if you find that it is not generating the correct code, if it is leaving the caret in the wrong place for what it is that you're trying to do, or if you think about other types of statement completion that you'd like to see. Most of this was conveyed from Java behavior, but there are a few Salesforce Apex specific variants here, in particular the property syntax and, of course, the inline SOQL query syntax. And otherwise, I hope this helps to increase your overall enjoyment of the IDE, your velocity when you're writing Apex code, and keeps you from having to write what would otherwise be superfluous keystrokes just to write syntactically valid code. Thank you very much for your time, and once again, I hope everyone is staying healthy and safe, and I will talk to you again soon.